with the StreamYard. Oh, there we go. Now we back on. Yo, what is good, folks? Welcome to another episode of the Sports PSP podcast. Got my man, Undisputed World Champ. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great, man. How about yourself?
Chilling, man. Listen, sorry, folks, that we had to do the show on Sunday, Friday night. PSP was a little under the weather. It's because of that heat wave. So please, people, just stay inside. Try to drink as much water as you can. Try to stay hydrated at all times. This heat wave is no joke whatsoever. So please stay inside. And if you're gonna have a nice drink or something, please drink responsibly. Before we get into some of the sports stuff, got a comment from True the King TV. Shout out to True the King TV. Go check them out on the crossover on that's on FYF Sports Debates with Mario Knows Best, Casual, of course, Hollywood Herm, and of course check out True the King TV's YouTube channel, his podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe to his content as well. But champ, let's talk about the NBA Finals. It's over. Boston Celtics have secured their 18th NBA championship. They are now with the most championships in NBA history, champ. What were your thoughts about the finals? What were your thoughts about Jaylen Brown winning Finals MVP and so much more?
Oh, number one, although I'm a Laker fan, you gotta respect the green and white. They're the most storied franchise in NBA history, man. Uh, a lot of trailblazing when you think about, the great Bill Russell and the Boston Five and everything of that nature. With the Boston Celtics, though, I hate to say this, I don't think it's going to be celebrated like it should among the NBA because they're going to look at it as, heck, this is what you were supposed to do. The path through the East was pretty much laid before you because a lot of the injuries that was going on. So the only thing you really had to worry about was get the job done in the finals. You were favored to win. Plus, a lot of things went for you, which it's not their fault. You play who shows up. If you think about Embiid was injured, when you think about Giannis was injured, just to name a few. Donovan Mitchell, one of the top players in the league, he was hurt. And then when you finally get to the finals, I just think that the Dallas Mavericks were overmatched by a superior team at that point. But one has to wonder, are people going to celebrate it like they did in previous? Because, like I said, the path was laid before them. Like I said, you play who shows up. That's the only team that you can play. But there was a lot of injuries to their opponents, and people are going to say, "Hey, this is what you were supposed to do." This was more of you're supposed to win rather than hey, overcoming the odds, beating the odds, and definitely submitting your footing on top of the mountain. But I'm definitely glad that they was able to win. Like I said, one of the storied franchises in the league. Jaylen Brown, the white person, won the finals. Um, I gotta say, although Jason Tatum in the first couple of games didn't shoot well, he made up for it in a lot of his playmaking and rebound. I mean, one game he had 11 rebounds. That was very
And his
good.
defense too. His
Yes,
defense.
indeed. And I will say this, man, hey, Dallas better be glad that Porzingis got hurt when he did. Otherwise, it would have got a hell of a lot worse than it did. Because, when you look at game one, it got bad quick. We was hoping for a good finals, a good competitive finals. We was talking about, Kyrie's return to Boston and, you know, Luca and Kyrie versus Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. But, that whole team as a whole, I mean, it got bad quick. Porzingis, was putting on a clinic those first couple games. So I mean, that was great on their part. Had a gentleman sweep, but I think definitely they did a hell of a job securing that championship for the first time since 2008. But hey, congratulations to the Boston Celtics. Hopefully, we'll be back here talking about y'all again next year because right now y'all are the overwhelming. Y'all are the top dogs in the East at this point in time. Y'all
Oh,
are the
there's
top
no
dog.
question about that.
Yeah.
There's no question about that, champ. Even though people are going to dismiss it or diminish what Boston accomplished because of the competition, as you mentioned, that they face, but at the same time, to your point, that's not on them.
Mm-mm.
We only going by with what we compete. It's still a great accomplishment for Boston because you look at a couple of years. Remember with Joe Mazzulla, he had to take over in the aftermath of the whole Ime Udoka situation. And
Mm-hmm.
Ime Udoka had success with the Boston Celtics going to the Eastern Conference Finals multiple times, taking them to the finals in 2022.
Yes,
Joe
indeed.
Mazzulla comes in, does a very good job with this team, and has proven that he can lead, he can make adjustments, and he's the right type of replacement for a guy like Ime Udoka. Jason Tatum, as far as shooting wise, didn't shoot the ball particularly well. He was less than 40% from the field in the NBA Finals, but he
Mm-hmm.
made up for it with passing, playmaking, and defense. Had he played like he did in Game 5, champ, he probably would have won he probably would have won Finals MVP if he played exactly like he did in Game 5, just like he should have in Games 1, 2, or 3. He probably would have won Finals MVP. He would have.
Mm-hmm.
What was more impressive in Game 5 was his shot selection. My problem with Tatum is that too many times he settles for the step back or the fadeaway threes. Just attack the basket. And you saw more of that in Game 5. If anything, he made up for it with his shot selection. He definitely made up for it with his playmaking and his defense. Porzingis, had he stayed healthy, who knows? The Mavs would have been swept. Now I'm
Yes.
just being the Mavs would have been swept because they couldn't stop him in the interior. They couldn't stop him as far as with blocking shots and the way he was shooting threes in the first game. But man, Boston, they should definitely be proud. First time since 16 years since you've won an NBA championship. Now you finally won, and what better way? Hey, right after the finals, you went to Miami and celebrate, and then you came back on Friday for the parade. But congratulations to the Boston Celtics, and also too a lot of great other players as well, contributors. How about Drew Holiday?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, champion who won with the Milwaukee Bucks, who brings that type of knowledge and experience to the Boston Celtics. How about
Yes.
Derek White in terms of his defense? How the way he was making shots, how the way he was getting back. Remember in game 2, that big block that he had because the Mavs at some point they had a chance to come back in that game, but they didn't. And Derek
Yeah.
White was a key contributor as well. Drew Holiday, the defense, the rebounding, and I just think with Boston, man, they're the team in the East because you look at Milwaukee. Look, Doc Rivers. I'll say it before. I'll say it again. He's gotten more opportunities than the Kardashians have gotten with men. I'm gonna leave it at that. Giannis, in the past couple of series in the playoffs, hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then now with Damian Lillard there, still the Celtics clearly they've won the trade. They've won the trade, and it ended up resulting them to winning a championship. As for Dallas, champ, look, Luca. Look, I wish Luca could have played better on defense, even though defense that's never been his forte. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, he didn't had enough help. Kyrie Irving didn't play particularly well in the finals. The only best game that he had was games 3 and game 4. But overall, I was kind of disappointed with Kyrie Irving's performance. What were your thoughts about the Dallas Mavericks?
Well, number one, they need some serious help in the middle. They need some help at the power forward and the center position because if you like I said, if Porzingis had played all the games, it would have been bad quick. It would have got even worse than it did. So they need some serious help in the middle, and they need some defensive help as well as far as perimeter defense. Because yes, these are good offensive players that you have in Luca and Kyrie, but you need some. One of the big reasons why they lost was defense. And while we on the subjects of giving people credit, give a lot of credit to Brad Stevens, as well. Him being, at the head of the front office as well. And not to mention, give a lot of credit to Danny Ainge, although he's not there, knowing when to break up the big three in order to pave the way in order to get Jason Tatum and, and Jalen Brown. So big ups to those two guys, knowing to keep the dynasty together. There was always rumors that they were going to break up, especially after they lost the NBA Finals a few years ago with Ime Doku and that team that they had. But credit to the Boston Celtics for staying the course, turning off the outside noise and knowing to keep that team together. And and big ups to Jalen Rose as well, because he told us, you do not break up this core group, you keep them together. So don't be surprised if we're back next year, talking about this same team doing a repeat. Now, although we've had 6 different champions in the past 6 years, don't be surprised, because, like I said, Boston is like a clear path on the East right about now. Everybody else is trying to really, really catch up to them at this point in time. Plus, there's rumors about Jimmy Butler may be leaving Miami at a certain point. He might be going back to Philadelphia, maybe coming to the Lakers. You just never know. But Boston has the most complete team, and I can fully expect to see them back here next year. They silenced a lot of critics at this point in time.
They certainly did. They certainly did, and rightfully so. They're the NBA champions. Just major kudos to them. I underestimated Boston. I actually had the Mavs in 6 or 7 because I just thought that Kyrie and Luka would be enough. But collectively, Boston, they have a great unit. They play
Mm-hmm.
defense. Even though Minnesota Timberwolves had the number one defense in the NBA, they're a younger, more inexperienced team than the Boston Celtics. So I think Boston had that advantage given what they've known to do in the East. And I just think with Tatum and Brown, Jason Tatum's going to get a big contract. 5 year, 315 something $1 million. Last year, Jalen Brown got 5 year, 300 million. So I don't
Mm.
see those two breaking up. And Jason
No.
Tatum, rightfully so, is worth the money. He's top 10 player in the NBA. So I think with Boston, they have a bright future as long as they stay where they are and as long as nobody gets in their way. Um, let's before we move on to another subject, I want to take some time to talk about Willie Mays. Rest his soul. Great baseball player, legendary, historic baseball player, passed away. Champ, what were your thoughts of Willie Mays?
Number one, that's a sad occasion because he's one of the trailblazers in baseball. He played back in the 50s. Played in the Negro Leagues. As we all know, that Negro League stats have got integrated into Major League Baseball at this point in time, and Josh Gibson has become the all-time hitter. So big ups to Major League Baseball for recognizing the contribution that those men made and the sacrifices that they made. Man, look, I'm going to be very, very honest with you. Some people can say that Willie Mays is the greatest of all time, man. You know, 12 gold glove, a dozen all stars, you name it,
24 All
he's done it.
Stars.
Huh?
24 All Star
24 all
appearances.
stars, yeah. Over a dozen all stars. I mean, the list leaves like a who's who. Over 300 hits, over 300 stolen bases, you name it, he's done it. Not to mention, man, look, you have to be envious of New York sometimes because it's just a spoil of riches when it comes to sports in New York, man. Back then, when Willie Mays was playing with the New York Giants, back when it was the New York Giants instead of the San Francisco Giants, they had Mickey Mantle, Jackie Robinson, and Duke Snyder all in the same city, and that had to be that had to be just sports galore for you to have some of the greatest of all time all in that city at one time and in that sports community at one time. And even Mickey Mantle himself said at one point, he's quoted as saying this, that the best outfielder was Willie Mays. So for him to be the trailblazer that he was, and to pave the way so we could be sitting here talking right about now about sports, is nothing short of amazing. Not to mention, man, he's one of the greatest of all times Godfather. He's Barry Bonds' Godfather. So prayers to not only the Mays family, but the Bonds family as well, because Barry Bonds and his family was very, very close to Willie Mays' family. But as far as being a trailblazer goes, man, Willie Mays, I salute you not only as the trailblazer as you are, but you were a military veteran. And as you all know, I'm a military veteran as well. I salute you in serving in the Korean War to pave the way to have what we have right now. So not only as a veteran in baseball, but a veteran in the armed forces. I salute you, Mr. Mays. I think I speak for everyone. I say this. We appreciate everything that you have done, not only for baseball, but for the country as well. So, I mean, for you being a trailblazer and you being a veteran that paved the way for many people like myself, like PSP, and the baseball community, we thank you and we salute you.
Definitely, definitely. Let's read some comments over here. Got my man Patrick L. Brown. Go check him out on the grid. He said, "Happy Sunday, fellas. Hope it's all well and staying hydrated." And he also has another comment. Rickwood game was very special. It was good to see Reggie Jackson, Barry Bonds, Ken Griffey Jr. out there paying homage to Willie, man. And when you look at Willie Mays' accomplishments, man, you could make a case for the greatest baseball player. 24-time All-Star, World Series champion, a two-time NL MVP. He was NL Rookie of the Year in 1951, 12-time Gold Glove Award. He won the Roberto Clemente Award back in 1971. He was the NL batting champion. He led the NL in home runs 4 times. He also led the NL in stolen bases 4 times. I mean, he's retired. His jersey is retired by the San Francisco Giants and the New York Mets. And of course, man, his service during the Korean War. So not only he was a great baseball player, a pioneer for baseball, but as far as his service, man, and I think it's important that before we move on to the next subject, let's have a moment of silence real quick. Thank you. But shout outs to Willie Mays, man. Great baseball player. His family. He will be truly missed. I mean, what an icon. Champ, let's talk about Sunday, man. Great Sunday. One more day before the weekday, but sooner or later, 4th of July, soon to be coming. Good barbecues out there. I know you're gonna be having some cookouts, some stuff like that. But let's talk about a good Sunday. I was thinking about this one for a comedy one. We all love our comedy. My favorite comedian, Martin Lawrence. Everyone knows Marty Marr from,
Yeah.
I mean, Do the Right Thing, The House Parties, of course, his sitcom, Martin, big time sitcom back in them days, folks, in the 90s. And of course, the other movies, Blue Streak, Big Mama's House, Bad Boys, of course, with Will Smith. Champ, I'm gonna let you go first. What is your favorite Martin Lawrence moment?
Man, look, it will have to be, when he impersonated Nino Brown on the Martin Lawrence show when he
All with the dog.
yeah, with the dog because he was trying to get to the bottom of who stole his CD player. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget, man, bro man came out the bathroom and said, you know what? I left it up under the bathroom sink. So and then when that segment is over, he just looked at everybody and said, I need you. That was a very, very funny. That was one of the most funniest segments you ever want to have. And I mean, not only that, people don't realize, Martin Lawrence, one of his cousins, the reason he was in those house party movies, uh, I think it either Play was his cousin.
Yes,
Yeah, Play was his cousin. So,
yes.
to see him DJing in those movies and doing those things, but that had to be the funniest segment in the Martin Lawrence show, man. Not to mention those epic roasting battles with Pam. That was, I mean, that was something special, man. To never get one episode, he said your breath smelled like train smoke, and that was just
Oh,
one of
the Mama Bird episode. Mama Bird
yeah,
episode.
yeah. Never forget that he said your breath smell like train smoke, and that was like I said, man. My favorite phrase is colorful, man. That was very very funny and colorful at the same time, man. Big ups to Martin Lawrence, man. And not only that, man, hosted Def Comedy
Comedy
Jam
Jam.
for as long as he did, man. Not only that, man, he was a fixture on HBO for a lot of his stand-up specials, man. For you to be, I don't think,
You so crazy.
yeah, I don't think no. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think no comedian other than let's say my distant cousin Richard Pryor had a run like Martin Lawrence did. I mean, he had a spectacular run. I mean, at his peak, Def Comedy Jam, the Martin Lawrence Show, Bad Boys, not to mention a lot of. I don't think nobody can match Martin Lawrence's peak, other than I will say Dave Chappelle. Other than that, his peak for peak, but there's nobody touching Martin Lawrence in the comedy game and the movie game.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Patrick, my man, has a comment right here. My favorite Martin moment when he was on the Varnell Hill show and acted. Oh yeah, the one with Jodeci. And of course, this one, the chemistry with him and Pam was hilarious. As a kid who grew up in the 90s, I lived for those spars with Pam would make anyone laugh.
Yeah,
Was, man. I don't know. I mean, you kind of stole my thunder because I was going to bring up the Pam moments, especially the one in which you talked about the train smoke one. But my favorite Martin Lawrence moment, man, there's a lot of good ones. I don't know, a lot. Oh my god, man, there's a lot of good Martin Lawrence moments. Big Mama's house. Remember when he was playing basketball with Trent and a couple
yeah,
other dudes at the basketball park, and then he dunked at the end of the game. That
yeah.
was another great one as well. Probably the "You So Crazy" one. Remember he said something water glycerin all over your body,
Yeah.
baby. that, that I mean that was hilarious, man. I mean,
That-
but Martin, my favorite is when he did all those characters from Jerome, Mama Payne, Otis, Roscoe, Dragonfly Jones, all them other characters that he impersonated, man. That was like my favorite character, and of course Shanae. The
yeah,
episode when my favorite one is when the "I've Got a Secret" episode. That's when Martin goes on the radio and starts revealing everyone's private personal business.
yeah,
So in order for him to win back his friends, he tells a story. One night 2 years ago, I tried to sleep with my neighbor Shanae. And then Shanae at the end of the episode is like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know. You come over. You come over." It's like it was like you remember that episode, champ?
I, you know what, man? That was a special time. Those were times when that would not be duplicated, man. Very, very special time, man. That was man. You took it back on this, man. You outdid yourself. I salute.
Hey man, I mean, look,
Man,
I love I love comedy, man. And Chris Rock, he talked about how Martin was the man back in those days. I
yeah,
mean, a lot of people. I mean, and then also he was also underrated in that movie Boomerang, the Eddie Murphy movie. That was a good one
yeah,
too.
yeah. That he was underrated in that one, man. Blue Streak was one of the more
The Pizza Man one. Remember how
what
you delivering the pizza?
officer, I got your pizza. That was a good one. Oh man, look, I never forget when he was in Do the Right Thing, how he was instigating the guy who stepped on his shoes. $105 with tax. That was man, that was a special time, man. Like I said, for his peak, other than I would say Richard Pryor and maybe Dave Chappelle, for his peak, stand up and everything like that, Martin Lawrence, that was something special. That was something special, man. He was a special type. He was a special kind. I don't think we'll ever see a run. And when you think about when him hosting Def Comedy Jam, but you think about the people that followed him on that stage. You really had to be funny. It was never a bad show when he was on there. When you think about the episode with him and Eddie Griffin and Chris Tucker and Bernie Mac, that was a special time, man. So peak for peak, I don't think it's anybody in the comedy game that can come close to Martin Lawrence. I mean, he can, other than I would say, like I said, Richard Pryor. But I don't think anybody ever had a peak like Martin.
Man, Patrick, another moment Biggie on there. Pam and Gina were vying for a spot on tour. Then, when they didn't get it, that dialogue was epic. You get one, you get two there. I mean, let's not forget the Biggie episode. That was kind of funny though.
Yeah,
My other favorite with Martin is that how he and everybody were getting on Tommy for not having a job. I always loved every time when they bring up Tommy. We all know good and damn well you ain't got no job.
And not only that, man, something funny happened. I don't think I said this to you. You know, now you know in Mortal Kombat they got a Dragonfly Jones character that was created. So
Yeah,
silence, silence. So,
silence.
so you know that just goes to show you that you know Martin Lawrence and that legacy stays on even with a game like Mortal Kombat. So that was that was epic, man. Dragonfly Jones doing the whole, especially when he told a joke about I studied under Bruce Lee. He was on the third floor as I was on the second. And he said that'll be the only joke told in this class. So I mean, Dragonfly Jones was a character within itself. When you think about Jerome, just like you said, Jerome, and you know, don't forget old Otis. You know, take your whooping like a man. When you know when Pam and Gina had to testify on that trial for the bank robbers. Old Otis. That was epic, man. That was an epic time to be alive, man. Salute, man.
Salute, salute. One last one for Patrick. It would have ended the right way if we knew what Tommy job was. It felt like a cliffhanger, but how he and Pam finally realized their friendship was deeper than jokes. Oh yeah, I can't. Oh yeah, remember the episode when Martin plays the love doctor, and then
Mm-hmm.
he unfortunately helped Pam and Tommy have more than like a relationship, more than a friendship, and then when
Yeah.
Martin's reaction was like, "No." But at Martin Man, that was the show back in the days in the '90s. That was a great show. I mean, there was
Hell of a
a lot of
show.
great black sitcoms in those times. Living Single, Martin, Fresh Prince, Family Matters. Boy, the '90s were great back in them days. And Martin, to your point, champ, at his peak, at his prime, could you name
You
a
want
better
to
comedian than him at that time?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, man, look, there was times, man, look, when you had your own HBO special, that's when you made it, man, in my humble opinion. There's a lot of great comedians during that time when you think about it. But when you were on HBO, in my humble opinion, that was the whole you made it sequence. And the two highest rated segments to this day on HBO is Martin and my man Eddie Griffin. So those are the two highest. And when you think about guys who've had their own sitcom on HBO, from Gilbert Gottfried to Andrew Dice Clay to even to Eddie Griffin to Martin Lawrence, and to this day Eddie Griffin and Martin Lawrence, they're the two highest rated in the world in the history of HBO at this point, even today in social media days with streaming and everything. That says something about not only how good their comedy was, but how competitive the market was back then. Back then, when you think about the comedians that we grew up on and how all of them got into movies, when you think about Earthquake, when you think about Cat Williams, when you think about Kevin Hart, when you think about all of these guys, I mean, even Uncle Elroy went, from Friday. All of those guys at one point or another started in the '90s doing death comedies then. And when you think about how big they got, and it all stemmed from that show, that was the best era of comedy that you are. Now that's not
Oh
taking
yeah.
anything from the social media guys. All of those guys are funny as well, especially Desi. Hey, he's from Georgia, so big ups to him. But during that time when you had an HBO special and you was hosting Def Comedy Jam, that said a lot about you as a comedian. Like I said, only two did that, and that was Eddie Griffin and
Martin Lawrence.
Martin Lawrence. So big ups to those two guys, especially in that competitive market back then. And only regret is that only thing that I hate didn't happen is we didn't see Martin Lawrence on Comic View. That would have been epic as well. But
That, that would have been great. And even Patrick mentioned Martin had Tracy Morgan on several occasions. Hustle Man. Let's not forget
yeah,
Hustle Man.
yeah. That's the beauty of being how big you are. You could give younger an up and coming talent, chances to give their big breaks. And I think that he did that. And although certain things have come out lately, big ups to the great Russell Simmons for giving a lot of comedians their big break on Def Comedy Jam. So hey man, look, when you think about comedy, the '90s was the apex of
Oh yeah.
comedy. The
And
'90s
Martin
was the apex.
And Martin, when he
And
was
Martin was
hosting,
the catalyst.
and not only that, there were a lot of great comedians there too. Rest his soul, Bernie Mac was there too. You
Yes.
also had a lot of good ones, and Martin was the host. And they felt like Martin was the guy, given the type of work that he did. But Martin Lawrence showed people that you could make it. Martin came from the DC area to get to where he is at this point. Hysterical, man. He was just funny. I still watch the Martin Lawrence show still to this day, man. Hey, you can't blame anyone. I mean, still to this day, the 90s, as far as comedy goes, that was at its peak. That was
Mm-hmm.
at its peak, in my opinion.
Yeah. Don't forget about the Malcolm and Eddie show, man. You gotta get, like I said, man.
Oh yeah, don't forget that. Oh, don't
Malcolm and
forget
Eddie.
that. Oh yeah, and oh, of course, Patrick brought up a great point. Robin Harris was in that class as well. Let's not forget Robin Harris.
Yeah,
Don't
don't forget about don't forget about the mastermind behind one of my favorite movie, Baby Age Kids, man. That was
oh man, you stole my idea. Just
my bad, man. You
see,
know I
like
think 100 miles per hour. So
yeah,
hey
yes
man,
you
we
do.
don't die, we multiply. So that was a man, look, you think about comedy back then, and one thing when people don't think about, man, when you think about a movie like Harlem Nights and the star-studded cast that they had, and when you think about Life, these days those will be $1 billion movies, considering the cast that they had. You had three of the funniest men in Harlem Nights, arguably in history. I mean, when you think about comedy, you think about Red Fox, Richard Pryor, and Eddie Murphy. You can almost stop there. That's damn near $1 billion. That's $100 million movie nowadays.
And there were other and there were other great casts as well. Let's not
Yeah,
forget rest his soul, Charlie Murphy,
yeah,
the
Charlie
great
Murphy.
Della Harris.
Yes, look, just to name a few. Then you think about Life, Bernie Mac. You know, just to, I
Anthony
forget it.
Anderson.
Yes. So you think about those. Like I said, these days those will be almost a big. It'll take $1 billion just to pay the cast alone. So at least 500 mil at minimum. So when you think about what they were back then versus how iconic they are now, those were some of the most apex movies that you ever want to see as far as comedy is concerned. Like I said, man, we're never gonna get a greater era than the 90s in comedy. And man, and let's hey, don't forget about, regardless of the controversy, don't forget about Eric Spears, man. And his
Yeah.
impersonations of everybody. you know, how he
Oh,
impersonated Charles Barkley. The famous song, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, Kenny Kobe, everybody know Kobe 40 pounds, 50 points, the greatest player. Let me tell you something, Kobe. Don't forget about Eric Spears, man. He deserves to be in that discussion as well, man. He was a great comedian as well.
he does. Chris Tucker too. Let's not forget Chris Tucker too.
Yeah, straight out of Georgia, man. Got all those Rush Hour movies. Yeah, we love the action by Jackie Chan, but we watched it because of Chris Tucker and his comedy, and his comedic relief. So
Hmm. Absolutely. Speaking of the '90s, let's talk about another great moment in time, other than comedy, music.
yeah,
Favorite Joe song, Joe the singer. He was a great. He put up a lot of great hits.
yeah.
Don't want to be a player. All the things a man won't do. I want to know more and more. A lot of great songs from Joe. What is your
Yeah.
favorite one from him, champ?
You know what, man? It has to be a feature because although I'm from down south, man, one of my favorite artists was Big Pun. So to see him with Big Pun during that time saying I don't want to be a player no more, that was one of my favorite songs by Joe. Like I said, granted it wasn't his song, but it was good to see him with Big Pun. That R&B rap spin is always good to see. When you see that, because Big Pun so underrated in his rhyme scheme and his wordplay and his
Don't
storytelling.
forget Beware.
Yeah, beware. That's on my playlist. So I mean, to him to see him on that song, not to mention, man, I can tell you're lying because you're replying, you stutter,
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 and then
stutter.
Mystical, him and that the remix with Mystical. What you like? What you say? I mean, it was a very, very that was two of my favorite songs. Him, Still a player with Big Pun and Stutter. Both the remix and the original version. So Joe was so talented, man. He was underrated, man, and I think the reason why I think he's overshadowed because it was so much. Again, the '90s. When you think
Too
about
much
everything
competition.
was at the peak of competition. You had a lot of singers, which we can't say their names on the air because of things of that nature. But you had the king of R&B, and then it was everybody else, and then it was just yeah. Then not to mention you had Michael Jackson, Barry White, Luther Vandross. They were still having their runs in music, so it was very
Usher.
very competitive back then. So I don't think he gets the credit that he deserved because those were some classic songs. When you want to put that music on, if you get what I'm trying to say, then guess what? Put on Joe. Joe is one of those artists that you may want to consider when you want to put that music on. So yeah,
Absolutely, he's very underrated, and I think to your point, Tim, there were a lot of great artists during the '90s that unfortunately Joe was kind of overshadowed. I mean, there was Usher, there was a lot of good ones as well. Another underrated singer too, Tyrese though. Tyrese Gibson
yes,
was a very underrated singer. Let's go to the comments from my man Patrick. He said, "If you haven't heard, last Friday is a go. Yes, there's been news about that. It's been reported that last Friday is a go." And he also commented, "Favorite Joe track, Thank God I Found You, the remix featuring Mariah Carey and Nas. The Make It Last Forever version. That's a good one." And the other one is I Want a Girl Like You featuring Jadakiss was my jam during high school from a hidden classic drumline. Interesting. Um, Favorite songs from Joe. All the Things You Man Won't Do. Don't Want to Be a Player. That was the
mm-hmm.
song before Big Pun. All That I Am. Joe had a great voice, very talented. Again, hasn't gotten the credit or recognition that I think he deserves, because again, of course, the competition that he was dealing with against. But if you want to play some songs late at night, just chilling, relaxing, go listen to Joe. That I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in the '90s, boy, that was some good quality music. Like I said, man, it wasn't just comedy. Music back in them days in the '90s, champ, that was the thing.
Yeah. People love to discredit back then, but you actually had to have advertisement and you had to go to the record store in order to get them. So I mean, you sold out of records. One no streaming sites back then. Plus, like I said, there was so much competition back then, and I think I think Nelly said it best. I rapped in the most competitive era in history when it came to music. He said, because not only did I have to compete with Jay-Z, Eminem, and Dre, Snoop, and everybody else, I had to compete with R&B as well. So that was the most competitive time in not only rap, but not only R&B and hip, but music in general. I mean, when you think about every genre of music and when it was at its best, you have to put the '90s in there. When you think about, I don't know if there's a lot of grunge fans out there, but grunge music, uh, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, those that was all in the '90s. So you when you think about that, you think about revolutionary music as far as grunge, gangster rap, hip hop, conscious rap, and everything. All of that stemmed from the '90s. So big like I said, not only that, man, the console wars was in the '90s. The Monday Night Wars was in the '90s. The Late Show Wars was in the '90s. You had, although we didn't have the internet back then, you had so much to choose from. You could, when it came to the late night talk shows, you had David Letterman. You had David Letterman. Excuse me, my bad for mispronouncing his name. Jay Leno. Then you had the greatest late night talk show of all time, this Arsenio Hall show. So there was a lot of options for you back then. Even if you didn't want to go one way, you could go another. Man, you always had your choice. Although the internet was in its infancy stage, I won't say it wasn't around. It was in its infancy stage.
Hmm. Champ, let's get back to some basketball. Patrick's gonna get mad at me. I know you're probably gonna get mad at me, but we got to talk about it. The Los Angeles Lakers acquired JJ Redick to become their new head coach. Champ, you were optimistic because you wanted to go into a different direction, and Dan Hurley looked like the guy for them, but he turned down the deal. What was it? A 6 year, 72 million dollar contract just
Yeah,
to be with the Lakers, but he turned that down because he was like, "No, I've already won national championships at UConn. I'm let me try my best to build a dynasty here as opposed to going to an NBA team even though it's the Los Angeles Lakers, but at the same time if things go wrong, I'm going to be viewed as the scapegoat."
yeah.
So I think the reason why the Lakers acquired JJ Redick is because, of course, LeBron. Their podcast, the things that they were doing, their relationship. I thought they should have gotten Monty Williams. After the Detroit Pistons decided to let him go after 1 year, they still owe him the remaining, $65 million of his contract. It's better for Monty Williams to join the Lakers because of his relationship with Anthony Davis going back to their days in New Orleans. Monty Williams is a well liked guy. I think he could do a better job as far as getting the other players to maximize their potential. JJ Redick, I'm not saying that JJ Redick doesn't know basketball. JJ Redick, if you just listen to him at ESPN, if you watch him on First Take, if you watch him on broadcasting in NBA Finals, he knows his basketball. But to be the head coach for a team, a lot of people are looking at it and saying, well, it's because of LeBron, your relationship with LeBron, and how are you going to handle this team? Is LeBron James going to allow him to do his job? And with the Lakers, man, champ, I hate to say this, this is comedy. It's looking like Comedy Central over here, man, because it's the Lakers are no longer the Lakers. What should the Lakers do? Do you think that Jeannie Buss should she just give somebody else to handle basketball operations? Should she what should the Lakers do, because this is not the type of situation you want to be in.
Number one, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. People was gonna break people. I've seen it all over the internet. People say, "Well, Pat Riley didn't have any coaching experience when he came to the Lakers and they won championships." That's very, very different because he was already juiced into the organization. He was a part of that organization at one point in time. Not to mention, he learned under Jerry West, Chick Hearn, so he was already juiced in with that organization. At one point in Pat Riley's career in Los Angeles, they used to call him Riles. They didn't call him coach, so he had to make them at one point look. You have to call me coach, so the players will respect me instead of calling me Riles. So that's a whole nother situation. And that team was already championship ready. He just had to add his own flavor into it. Not and also we've seen another example where a coach could succeed his first year in the league and taking someone to the NBA finals in Mike Dunleavy. We saw him take the Showtime Lakers, turn them into slow down Lakers, where they're more in the post rather than breaking out and running and gunning. And they were able to take them to the NBA finals, where we unfortunately lost to the GOAT in Michael Jordan, 4-1 in the finals. But I digress. Number one, a lot of things that need to stop happening is you have to get we have to stop having so many chiefs in the front office. There needs to be, in the great words of Joe Clark in Lean on Me, there needs to be one boss. One. And when you look back at the Lakers from 2010 on back to, I will say, 1981, you knew there was only one boss in the Los Angeles Lakers organization, and that was Dr. Buss. Now, he also had a very, very strong-minded general manager all of those years in the great Jerry West. There's no Jerry West on this team. I believe that Jerry West got players because they were good for the team and they were good to add to championship teams. Not because it looked good on paper, not because it was just going to put butts in the seats. It was because they were going to win championship teams. They were going to win championships. So you need a general manager that's going to stabilize that organization. We don't need guys that's just going to get big names. Everybody knew that the whole Westbrook situation wasn't going to work in Los Angeles and at the point of where basketball was during that time. We knew that wasn't going to work. Very, very ball dominant player, really couldn't shoot a lot of threes, really wasn't going to help you out on defensive perimeter, really stat padding when it came to, the triple doubles and everything. But we knew that was not going to work. And that is why, Frank Vogel unfortunately had to take the brunt end of that at that certain point. But they need to get a true general manager in there, not someone from the Laker organization. You need to get some fresh eyes in there to see exactly what's going on. Because you hiring within that organization is not getting you anywhere. It's not. You've tried that. What worked in the past is not going to necessarily work right about now. So what you need to do is you need to go out there and get you a general manager, a true general manager. I don't think Rob Pelinka has done okay. He did bring us a championship, but long term, I don't think that's going to work. Number two, stop getting players for the short term just for the name. Get you some players that's going to help long term. If you
That
look at
includes
all
the
the players
draft.
that if you look at all the players that we traded, with the exception of, Lonzo Ball, because he's been hurt a lot, God bless him, everybody has pretty much flourished after they left. When you think about Ingram, when you think about
Josh Hart.
Josh Hart, when you think about Julius Randle, he became a focal point in that New York offense and their defense and their pressure defense. When you think about Lonzo Ball, before he got injured, he became a defensive stopper as far as on the perimeter is concerned. So he made all defensive team at least 3 to 4 times in Chicago. So if you think about all of those players that we lost trading for AD, that could have very well been a long-term catalyst for a championship team when you think about it. So the thing is, you have to understand where the NBA is going as far as in the draft, as far as European players are concerned, and coaching. We haven't had a stable coach since Phil Jackson. Since Phil Jackson, we've been firing coaches at a rate of once every 2 to 3 years. So that's another thing we need to stop. My thing is, there's no free agent coming to Los Angeles because they're so unstable. You can no longer rely on Los Angeles being the brand that it is because of the advent of social media. You have to sell something else. There used to be where, hey, you come to Los Angeles, there's these opportunities in Hollywood. There's a lot of opportunities off the court. Now people, you can't sell them on that because of social media. Because Shaq proved long before social media, you could be a huge star without being in Los Angeles. He did that in Little Orlando. So you're no longer able to sell, well, this is Los Angeles, this is Hollywood. Hollywood is calling. No, you can't sell them on that anymore. Plus, you don't have a winning culture at this point in time. So first and foremost, you need to get a new general manager. You need to change the culture, and you need to change the way you scout. And you need to change in your scouting department. And you need to stop getting the most huge, big name players when you know they're not good for your scheme and know they're not good for your team. What's
So
happening
another.
is,
Go ahead, Chance.
I'm sorry, my head.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What's happening is LA loves a winner. But the thing is, when you're not winning and you're just bringing big name players in, eventually fans are going to catch on to that. And when you are just looking short-sighted in terms of, okay, let's just put some butts in the seat for now and then we'll figure things out later, you are doing not only your organization a disservice, but you're doing your fans a disservice.
Right.
And what shocks me most about this is because as a Laker fan, we thought that once Jeannie took over, it was going to be a turning point because she had been working in the organization for so long.
And not to mention,
Even
you're
back in the 80s.
replacing your brother Jim Buss, and we saw
Yes,
how
because
bad
it
he
was
was.
terrible when he was running over. It got bad quick. So everybody thought that Jeannie Buss was going to be the catalyst of what changed that organization around. But unfortunately, it's been a real, it's not much has changed except for that one bubble championship. It's been getting big name players that don't fit your scheme just for the notoriety, for the sake of getting the player. And that has basically backfired and interfered with us winning long term. And until they figure that out, we're going to continue to suffer as fans alone, especially after LeBron leaves, because LeBron only has maybe 2, 3 years. Hell, he can't play till he's 50. So he maybe has 2 to 3 more years at this point in time. So you better start darn well getting yourself together in gear. So when he retires, you have another core in order to bring in there. Otherwise, you're going to be suffering a long time, because even after Magic retired, at least you had hope with guys like Nick Van Exel and Eddie Jones that you were drafting, Eldon Campbell, Lonnie Divac that you had drafted, although we didn't make the playoffs. At least you had some holdovers from that Showtime squad in the 90s, where we wasn't doing as good until the late 90s. At least you had hope. Right now, you don't have a what to piss in or a window to throw it out of at this point in time. So you need to get it really together, Los Angeles, before you find yourself, and be patient. Look what being patient did for Boston. Look what being patient did for New York. Look what being patient did for the Golden State Warriors, for the Denver Nuggets. So be patient. Fans will be patient if they know you're committed to winning. They're not going to be patient if they know you're just bringing guys in just to put the butts in the seats.
Champ, I think you're gonna have to blow up house, clean up house. It's not just getting a GM. You're gonna have to completely clean up this house. LeBron's gonna finish his last couple of years in LA because of the business side. What are you gonna do with Anthony Davis? I suggest you probably trade him because AD, he was great last season. Played how many games he played? 75, 76 games.
76
So,
games, yeah.
and AD, given his durability history, how long is he going to last? I mean, you got some other nice players there with Austin Reeves, Vanderbilt on the defensive side, but I think it's just time to clean up house because first round in the playoffs, it's not enough anymore. Making the play-in tournament, not enough anymore. So you're just going to have to clean up house. You're going to have to get a right type of GM. I would love to see him get like a GM somewhere from the Bucks, somewhere from the Spurs, Thunder, or any good organization that can help out the Lakers. But it's going to take more than a while in order for you to deliver that. Question is, how are Laker fans, how are they going to tolerate it? How patient they're going to be? And look, with Genius, you got to get a basketball mind to help out this team. Genie can help out with the business stuff. Not questioning Genie with that, but you got to get a basketball mind and you got to get the right types of scouts, trainers to not only draft but also develop these young players. Because I've mentioned before, champ, Lonzo, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, Julius Randle, even D'Angelo Russell now with the Lakers. When they departed LA, they got better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an indictment on the Lakers as an organization because wait a minute, you have all this young talent who most of them who most of them have developed. Actually, all of them have developed. Some of them
Mm-hmm.
have been made all-star appearances, and yet at this point, it looks bad. If they had Dan Hurley, champ, that would have been a sign for something good to come. He's a young guy. He can work with some of the younger players. How's he going to work with LeBron? Because LeBron is perceived as this coach killer. I don't know how you feel about it. I'll let you decide that for yourself. You can speak on it. But I think with the Lakers, man, it's just not the right type of place in order to forget free agents, younger players. Because, yeah, it's LA. Yeah, it's a big market. Everyone loves being LA. But is it going to help me grow and evolve my game? Is it going to help me maximize my potential? And with the Lakers moving forward, man, how are they going to be? So you might as well clean up house. And if you think about trading for Anthony Davis or something to get first round pick or second round pick or something, if you can get a good return, you might as well do that.
I mean, the thing is this, and you bring up a valid point, PSP, with blowing it up, because the thing is, when it's not going to get any better with this team. We overachieved when we went to the Western Conference Final. It's not going to get any better. And my thing is, hey, for all, I will say this: we can talk about free agency, but guess what? Out of the last 10 years, only two free agents have really shown up in LA and made a difference. That was Ron Artest and LeBron. We haven't had a lot of big free agents come to Los Angeles. We haven't had a Shaquille O'Neal come there. We haven't had a lot of guys come there that was just gonna really just bring it, bring it hard and bring it and just change that culture that we have. And there's a reason for that, and that is the departure and unfortunately the death of Dr.
The
Bus.
bus.
The thing is, I think if he would still be alive, and it would be a whole nother situation in Los Angeles. There's no way that we would have went through what we went to at the end of Kobe's career. Excuse me. Not to mention what we're going through now. It's just like Europe for all this talk about how remember how this is no shade to Jeannie. She's a very nice lady, and she knows the business part. But remember how all the shade was being thrown on Jim Buss about trying to do a whole lot that really didn't make sense. They're
Oh yeah.
repeating the same cycle that they did with Kobe. The only difference is they're making the playoffs. They're repeating the same cycle. It's just like bringing players in that really don't make sense. Antoine Jameson back then didn't make sense. Russell Westbrook didn't make sense.
Just for name and notoriety
Yeah, just a
reasons
name and
alone.
notoriety. It didn't make sense.
Do you
And
remember?
now,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, champ.
oh my bad. And
Oh,
now you have LeBron on his last leg at this point in time. Although he's productive, you can't rely on him too much. Anthony Davis, you can't rely on him too much. He might break. So you're doing the same thing. The only difference is you have two players that are really just gasping, holding your collective breath in order to see if the time is going to come. Versus back then, you only had one player in Kobe. So it's basically you're repeating the same cycle that Jim did.
which is pretty strange because you're like Genie. You saw what your brother did, and that didn't work out. So why would you replicate that? And it's interesting that you bring that up, champ, because remember during the 2012-2013 season, Mike Brown was the head coach for like the first 5 or 6 games. He was let go. They
Mm-hmm.
could have brought in Phil Jackson, but instead they decided to go with Mike D'Antoni. And okay, but Mike D'Antoni, how does his style work with the older roster? That would fit well if you were like a younger roster, but you had Paul Gasol, who's in his 30s. Kobe was 34 at that time. Dwight Howard, yeah, he was 26, 27, but he's coming off the bad back, and then later he had the torn labrum. So, how was that going to work? But the problem is with the Lakers, they just keep on getting big name guys because they want to do everything they can to attract their franchise and the market, which is LA. So you're gonna have to go into a different direction by tanking. I hate that. I don't like tanking as much as people don't like to do it, but at the same time, if you're gonna continue going this way, what's it gonna get you? To your point, they overachieved. I mean, how far are you gonna go to a conference finals with that type of roster? You're probably going to, at best, make the playoffs or make the play in tournament and lose. That's about it with this Lakers team. But I hope JJ Redick can prove me wrong because he does know basketball. But with him and LeBron, how is that going to work? Yeah, it's going to work when you break down film, when you talk basketball, when you know X's and O's, or when you hang out or sip on some wine or whatever. But how is it going to work in an NBA game? How is it going to work in the locker room? How is that type of relationship going to work? And how is JJ going to do his part as far as with the players and LeBron? Is JJ Redick going to be allowed to do his job? That's the thing.
It's an interesting question that you bring up because the thing is, when you hire your drinking partner, it's kind of hard to, you know, it's kind of like, I will say this, it's kind of like us being on this podcast and all of a sudden one of us become each other's bosses. How's that going
Yeah.
to work? It's kind of weird. It's like, okay, how you go? Are you going to feel comfortable with coming to me? And even if you have to kind of like have this moment of uncomfortability, are you going to be able to come to me? And am I going to be receiving of that at a certain point? because it's going to be look like. And I know, and the thing is, people will say, "Well, everybody's an adult." You don't know how that's gonna be. You have a podcast with your coach. I mean, is the podcast going to continue? I mean, you got to ask yourself whatever happened to conflict of interest at a certain point, because the thing is, it's like, okay, you my drinking partner and my podcast partner, but you're also my coach now. How comedic is this at this point in time? And you got to ask yourself, when a coach like Monty Williams can get fired, because granted, there was a lot of off the court issues that he was having, because when you think about, a family member of his passed away, and then now his current spouse has cancer, that's a lot to deal with at this point in time. That's a lot to deal with. Now, for him to get fired, and he's had less than a year in order to try to turn this thing around after not only going to the NBA Finals, but also getting a number one seed in Phoenix at this point in time. But you can see a guy like JJ Redick, who's only been on TV and a podcast, to get a coaching job with arguably the most visible team in the NBA at this point. What does that say about NBA coaching? Is it becoming a civic joke at a certain point? Because whereas we're seeing in the NFL and a lot of other sports, we can't wait to see the next offensive coordinator or the next defensive coordinator step into that head coaching role. We're seeing guys with jobs that have no business having jobs in the NBA. Doc Rivers, unfortunately, included.
I think it's nepotism, champ. Because remember, Mike McCarthy, when he got the head coaching job for the Dallas Cowboys, was it really him in Green Bay, or was it really Aaron Rodgers or what he was surrounded with in Green Bay? Remember, I told you, Jerry brought Mike McCarthy over to the crib for beer and nachos. Am I lying?
You're not lying, but at least, I will say this, at least with McCarthy, he had a rap sheet.
I'll give him that.
For winning. He had a rap sheet, because there were some guys, that was there before him, that, with Brett Favre, he couldn't win with him, but he won with Aaron Rodgers, just a couple years after he became a starter. I think that's what got him the job, and then, he had a lot of good seasons. But even with him, at least he's winning. He's not Dallas. There's a difference between winning and Dallas Cowboy winning. He's not replicating that. He's not replicating that magic that he had at Green Bay. But Dak Prescott did have one of his greatest seasons this year. He didn't get a lot of help in the running game or on that defense. They was running through him like a hot knife through butter in the playoffs.
To his credit, he did a good job calling the plays on offense. Mind you, this was without Kellen Moore.
Yes. Yeah. So at least with him, you can say that. But in the NBA, you have coaches that have proven rap sheets. Monty Williams should not have been fired. And then for him to get fired, and this has nothing to do with the R word, by the way. This just has to do with coaching in general. Monty Williams get fired, but a guy who's just because he's cool with the guy, it's like, hired to be the head coach. It was just like, it's kind of like, a great wrestling mind says, you're the guy that works with the guy that draws the money, so you get the job. It doesn't make sense at this point.
It doesn't. It seems, but people are gonna look at it and say the power of LeBron is kind of like he's like the NBA version of the power of Oprah. So that's how they're gonna look at LeBron with this, man. But the only way they can solve all this, champ, is by winning. So the only way you can cure all this is winning, man. So I don't know what you're gonna have to be on. I mean, you're probably gonna have to be drinking. It's gonna be some long nights for you in being a Lakers fan. That I can tell you.
Yeah, I already got to deal with the Falcons. At least the Lakers brought some real relief to the team.
Hey, at least you got something with the Falcons to look forward to. I mean, they should win the division, and that's about it. At least you got something to look forward to.
But the basketball is going to be a long season.
You losing that division with the addition of Kirk Cousins and with everything you have now, champ, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know.
Yeah, that'll be nasty.
That'd be worse than the Falcons losing to the Panthers last year at Carolina, which a game you should have won.
Yeah, I mean, now, anytime you hold a team to 3 field goals and you don't win a game, that just goes to show you how bad your offense is. But I digress.
All right, let's talk about Speaking of NFL, we're gonna do one NFL one. We're gonna do quarterback one. Which young quarterback do you look forward as far as your career? One of them has not played, hasn't stepped foot in an NFL game yet. The other one has. He was injured last year. Unfortunately, he didn't play the rest of the season. Caleb Williams or Anthony Richardson, champ? Which quarterback, if you were an NFL GM, would you go forward with? Although it sounds unfair, but at the same time, folks, hey, look, I'm just trying to do what I'm trying to do, which is create content, and which is to give the fans something unique to talk about. So if you had a choice, champ, as a GM between Caleb Williams or Anthony Richardson, who would you go with?
I'm going with Caleb.
Hmm.
I'm going with Caleb. And I'll tell you why. Anthony Richardson, I think it was a reach to pick him that high. He didn't do so well when he was in the SEC. And granted, people could say that team didn't have a lot of talent or what have you. His stats did not knock your socks off at Florida, at the University of Florida. I know because I watch the SEC every single Saturday. I don't just watch Georgia. I watch college football. And SEC is one of the main things that I covered, as you already know. But I really don't see why. I had him projected to go in the late first round. Had no idea that he was going to be taken in the first, especially that high. I think he was selected fourth overall. Now it's going to be interesting to see what he does with Shane Steichen as his coach, because the thing is, Shane Steichen, they were within an eyelash of going to the playoffs last year with Gardner Minshew. They were within an eyelash this year of doing that. But I have to go with Caleb because guess what? He can flat out sling that ball. Now, I do think that he gets a bad rap for trying to play hero ball, but you have to understand something. Listen, you know this for a fact. You know where I'm about to go here. He had to play hero ball because he couldn't depend on his defense. Yeah, I mean, Lincoln Riley's formula for playing defense is not that good. I mean, it is very, very, that offense is going to always be high powered, dating all the way back to Oklahoma. When you had Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, not to mention Jalen Hurts, but that offense was always going to be on fire, putting up 60 points a game. But when it comes to that defense, they might give up 48. So
Hell,
he
they'll give
had to
up
play hero
70.
ball. So what's that?
Hell, they'll give up 70. Remember the game against
Exactly.
LSU the last time they went to the college football semi playoffs?
Yeah. So that was but yeah, that's the reason why he had to play a lot of hero ball. And if you really look at it back then, even Baker Mayfield had to play a little bit of hero ball when he played for Oklahoma. So yeah, it's a lot of I would take Caleb. This is although the Indianapolis Colts almost made the playoffs last year. Caleb is coming into the best situation any young quarterback can hope to come into. You have all of these weapons. You have running backs. You have wide receivers galore. You have the number one run defense in the NFL. You have the great Montez Sweat. Shout out to PSP. Warned me about Montez Sweat. I was trying to get Chase Young, but he kept telling me, we talked all day. I'm like, I want Chase Young. I want Chase Young. He's like, hey, man, trust me, Montez Sweat. And we almost had him. But, at the very last minute, Chicago took him from us. But the thing was for you to come in with this type of not only hype, but in a sports town like a Chicago, home of the Chicago Sky, home of the Cubs, home of the White Sox, and to come in the situation that you are in, quite frankly, you can't do anything but succeed. If you don't at least have a winning season this year, although you're in the blood and guts division as far as the AFC North is concerned, with Jordan Love and a lot of those quarterbacks up there, if you don't at least have a 9-8 season going into your first year with everything they put around you, this season is a failure. And guess what? All heads are going to roll in because now you have to fire the coach and everything because it will prove it just wasn't Justin Fields. It will prove it just wasn't just the Fields. It was coaching as well. So if I had to pick one, I would have to say Caleb, not just because of his talent, but because, he's a Heisman Trophy winner and he has tenacity and Also, this is the greatest position you could ever put a rookie quarterback in right now. Anthony Richardson, he's not the king of that division right now. We all know who the king of that division is, CJ Stroud. And
However, you
there's a
would
lot of
put him
questions about,
second. You definitely would put him second because we all know how much you feel about Trevor Lawrence, especially the contract the Jaguars gave him.
yes, yes. But, he more than likely will be second. I mean, and depending on how the mayonnaise man, Will Levis plays, you know, he'll, he'll fall somewhere between second and third in that range. But had to pick one, Caleb.
I'm gonna go with Caleb because I think this is the best situation for the Chicago Bears. It would have been much better had you gotten him an offensive lineman because, as you always say, champ, quarterback can't throw behind his back. This time, Chicago, later in the season, they improved defensively, and that was also because of the addition of Montez Sweat as well as other players as well. Montez Sweat went on to having a really good year, made the Pro Bowl, first time double-digit sacks. I told you about Montez.
Yeah, you did.
When you look at Chicago, they're loaded with weapons. They added DeAndre Swift. They brought him there. They also have Cole Kmet, who shout out to BRF Sports. He talked about how underrated Cole Kmet is. You added Rome Odunze, which the Falcons they should have drafted, but instead they decided to go with Michael Penix Jr. You could have went with Rome, or you could have went with Dallas Turner, but instead the Falcons went with Michael Penix, supposedly because he's the guy to be the successor to Kirk Cousins. Okay, you got him. You got Keenan Allen. So you loaded offensively. I still have issues with the head coach, though. So I think Caleb Williams, I think he has a really good case to win Offensive Rookie of the Year as long as he can stay healthy. Now, he's going to have to do a better job playing less hero ball. But how is he going to do that still with the concerns about that offensive line? Anthony Richardson, and plus, to your point, champ, I've said it before. There was no way, it doesn't matter which quarterback that you have, there's no quarterback that's going to overcome Lincoln Riley's defense. And that has been the problem with him in Oklahoma and in USC. And the reason why I told you he went to USC because he didn't want to deal with that SEC smoke. Oklahoma and Texas, they were going to the SEC, which they will be in 2024. Do you really think that Lincoln Riley could compete against that? Against Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Georgia, Texas A&M, Florida, Tennessee. I mean, there's a lot of competition that you got to deal with, and of course Texas, because Texas will be there as well. So he's gonna go to the Big Ten
That's even
and
worse.
USC. You got to deal with Penn State, Ohio State, the reigning national champions, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So the likelihood of you winning a national championship or even a Big Ten championship, slim to none. But I think with Caleb, Chicago is right. And not only is the best situation for him, it's the best situation because Chicago finally, historically, look at all the quarterbacks that have come into that franchise. How's that turned out? The best quarterback they've had in this generation was Jay Cutler. That ain't much to brag about.
No.
So with Caleb, I think this is the best situation for him. He also received a lot of flack for the fingernails and other things that weren't related to football. But my thing is, look, the kid is still young. He has a tremendous potential. He hasn't gotten to any legal issues whatsoever.
No.
So let's wait and see what he can do. I wouldn't be mad if you pick Anthony Richardson because you can make the argument if Anthony Richardson had played the entire season, who knows? The Colts would have won the division. And Anthony Richardson, yes, I understand, champ. I wasn't sold on his accuracy coming out of Florida, but shout outs to Roundup, and he brought it up. Look at the talent he had around him. It wasn't
Yeah.
like he was playing against top tier guys. It wasn't like he had the type of talent that CJ Stroud had at Ohio State or Stetson Bennett had at Georgia or
Yeah.
what Caleb Williams had. So imagine if you put Anthony Richardson with better talent during his time in Florida, perhaps we would have had a different perception of him.
Yes.
Don't you think?
Yeah, I think we would have. I think that we would have had and I blame that a lot on coaching as well. You know, they have not had a lot of coaching stability down there in Florida. I always say this: if you want to get fired quick, go to two places. You go to the SEC or go to Los Angeles. So you want to get fired quick for not winning, go to the SEC. They go to Los Angeles. So they will fire you quick if you do not win in one of those two places, especially in Auburn. You know, they had a coach in Gene Chiswick. He won a national championship. 2 years later, he was fired. So you want to get fired quick for not winning?
And
Los
Gus
Angeles
Malzahn,
Lakers and the
yeah,
SEC.
and Gus Malzahn during after Gene Chiswick's departure did a very good job during his time in Auburn.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
just couldn't beat Alabama. But I always say this, back then, even with my Georgia Bulldogs, as many players as we put, who could?
they
I
were in a
mean, who,
class and category by itself. There's
I
no
mean,
shame
yeah,
in
I
that.
mean, people we talk about, he never beat Alabama. Okay, who could? I mean, it's just kind of like asking yourself who could beat Mike Tyson back in the day. Nobody. So I mean, it's kind of like, you know, a lot of teams who beat Alabama in the college football playoffs and in the and in the national championship back then before we finally got on the hump or got over the hump and beat them, they didn't see Alabama a lot. So
Right.
you wasn't able to predict what you were going to throw out. On an average, I will say this: you're going to meet Alabama at least twice. If you're an SEC team, you're going to meet them once during the season, and if you're any good, you're going to meet them again in the SEC championship. Nick Saban ain't losing to you twice, so it's going
Yeah.
to be interesting to see what they do without Nick Saban. Big ups to Nick Saban, though, man. We'll miss
Yeah, big ups, big ups. One last topic, and we're gonna wrap up the show. One of the worst ideas in professional wrestling: the brawl for all. Champ, what were your thoughts about the brawl for all? There was this tournament, 16 men. It was created by Vince Russo, who was the writer for the WWF, now WWE. The reason why he created the idea is because he couldn't stand John Bradshaw Layfield. He thought John Bradshaw Layfield was cocky, arrogant, a bully, and they were backstage. Watch the episode, season 2, episode 4, I think, of Dark Side of the Ring. Vince Russo talked about how Bradshaw was such a bully and how Bradshaw bragged that he would whip everyone's ass if this were real. So Vince Russo was like, let's create this idea. Let's create this concept of the brawl for all. Let's make them fight for real. Jim Cornette, and anyone knows Jim Cornette, he thought it was a horrible idea and to champ colorful. Because we all know if you listen to Jim Cornette in his podcast or on YouTube, he has a lot to say. Jim Ross, like I said before, if there's two people I want to talk to about professional wrestling, it's Jim Ross and Jim Cornette. Jim Ross didn't rule out the idea at first because because there was no precedent. So he wanted to give it a try and see how it goes. Correct me if I'm wrong, champ. The goal was for Dr. Death Steve Williams. He was the overwhelming favorite, and they wanted
you.
to see him face Steve Austin. That didn't end up happening. It ended up going to Bart Gunn. And remember the match between Bart Gunn and Dr. Death Steve Williams. Dr. Death Steve Williams, unfortunately, he tore his hamstring and was later knocked out in that match. And Jim Cornette was furious. Go watch the episode. I don't need to tell you about Jim Cornette's reaction. But unfortunately, champ, a lot of people were hurt. Godfather was hurt. Um, who was the wrestler who had sight in one eye? I can't remember his name. Charles Cornette, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was literally a horrible idea because you're getting wrestlers to fight for real. And then on top of that, something that they've never done. And then they had judges and referees who've never done this type of stuff before. So it's just a reflection just to how bad the idea was and just how much, man, how much Jim Cornette really despises Vince Russo because how Vince Russo did not take wrestling seriously, how little or no respect that he had. He actually thought that even though Dr. Death Steve Williams is short in his career, this is what Vince Russo said. But it wasn't like Dr. Death Steve Williams was entering his prime or his peak.
Mm-hmm.
And just listening to what Vince Russo said, he actually said he was totally entertained with the whole brawl for all concept. I'm like, is this dude really that dumb when it comes to wrestling? Is I don't know, champ. Go further.
Number one, I will say this. Look, it was a horrible idea, but I get the idea. Hear me out. Back then was the beginning of the UFC renaissance. And Vince was always, well, Russo, I would say, Mr. Russo was always trying to get some reality based angle going. And back then, UFC was kind of blowing up just a little bit at a time, but it was blowing up. So, you want to put the realness in there. So I get the idea, but the way it turned itself into, I mean, people don't realize this. Even the great Dan Severn, one of the most successful UFC people in history, even he got hurt in there, and even withdrew from the tournament because
Right.
he was getting hurt. Dan Severn. If you watch the UFC back in its infancy stages, Dan Severn was one of the catalysts of what made the UFC great. Especially back when it was a tournament. So even the great Dan Severn, even though he was in there initially, he got hurt real, real bad, and even he withdrew. As far as the brawl for all was, I mean, it got too many people hurt. It was really, really, when you looked at it, especially me being an amateur, back in the day, it's like it kind of cringe when you look at like that don't make sense. That don't make sense. And looking at it as a child, you thought it was an angle, a wrestling angle, because remember we were children during the Attitude Era, teenagers, I would say. But now looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, they did try to do that, but when you look back on it, it was absolutely terrible. And I believe it got even more terrible when they did what they did at WrestleMania 15
Oh my
when
god,
they
when you mean when
when
Bart
they
Gunn, the winner, had to face
they
Butterbean?
had to face. No, the thing about that, they didn't even have anything for Bart Gunn after he had won the Brawl for All. They didn't
Didn't he
have
go to
anything for.
Japanese
Yeah,
wrestling or something right after?
yeah, he didn't. He was just kind of sitting around lingering. So they had this bright idea, Mr. Russo, as usual, brought in Butterbean. You know, not only was he a heavyweight boxer, but back then you had the tough man competition. If you remember the tough man competition, they was out there. That was the brawl for all on steroids, if you get what I'm trying to say. So I mean, not only was he, a super heavyweight boxer, but he was, a tough, the winner of the tough man competition. So, for you to put him in there as far as, trying to trying to go against a professional boxer in real time, and he went down like a sack of potatoes in the first round. And I think the thing lasted like 90 seconds. And he went down quick and he went out quick. I think that was the climax. I won't even say it was the climax. It was the anticlimactic end of the brawl for all at that point in time, because it's just like, wow, the brawl for all was already horrible. Now you put the winner of it against a super heavyweight experienced boxer with a person. I mean, and Bart Gunn, I don't even think he had an amateur background at a certain point. I don't even think he was an amateur. So to put him in there with Butterbean at a certain point, who else was at that time? I would say everybody knew who Butterbean was. Super heavyweight champion, you know, hell of a skilled boxer, regardless of his size. Don't let size fool you. You see a lot of skill.
Oh, he had power.
Butterbean had skill when it came to boxing, and he will knock you out. And you like I said, Bart Gunn went down like a sack of potatoes, and that was the end of the anticlimactic brawl for all. So brawl for all was a horrible idea. It killed a lot of it. Be thankful that it didn't kill a lot of other careers. Unfortunately, it big ups to Dr. Death Steve Williams, because people don't bring him up during, as far as all time greats, but he was a great. When you think about the varsity
Four-time
club,
All-American at the
yeah,
University of Oklahoma as a football player and a wrestler.
yeah. When you think about the varsity club, you think about Scott Steiner, Rich Steiner, and you think about who? Dr. Death Steve Williams. So, funny thing about Dr. Death Steve Williams, he was the reason why Stone Cold could call himself Steve Williams, was because of Dr. Death
Yes,
Steve.
Dutch Mantel.
Yes,
Yeah, Stone Cold at the time, he's like, my name is Steve Williams. Dutch Mantel's like, you can't be Steve Williams. There's already a Dr. Death Steve Williams. You got about
yeah.
15 minutes to come up with the nickname. So that's how the nickname Stone Cold Steve Austin
Steve
came into
Austin,
play.
yeah. So, man, I will say this, man. Brawl for all, man. I'm glad you brought this up. I would encourage anybody who's listening to this podcast to go watch Dark Side of the Ring Brawl for All because, man, I'm gonna tell you this. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of enemies in this world, but I don't think none can match how much hate that Mr. Cornette has for Mr. Russo. Because I'm gonna tell you, I mean, I know people who don't hate people don't hate their high school bully as much as he hates Mr. Russo.
I sent you that rap video he did on Russo.
Yeah, that was the Ether ain't got nothing on that. That was
That that is crazy. But to Jim Cornette's point, what he makes a great point though. He gets fed up when people say that it's fake. He could say it may be choreographed, but at the same time, there's nothing fake about people breaking their bodies. And then
no,
after the brawl for all, unfortunately, Draws. Remember what happened to Draws? I mean, he's still to this day paralyzed because of
yeah,
that accident
yeah.
pile driver by D'Lo Brown. Draws said that he and D'Lo are still good friends, wishes nothing but the best. But that's a perfect example why wrestling that's not fake in terms of the injuries. There's nothing fake about the types of injuries, and unfortunately, Draws, man, that was really unfortunate what happened.
There's nothing. I don't even say the word fake when it comes to wrestling. I just say the F word. Stay away from that word. That's it's not. And shout out to Louise. Louise knows tunes. He's a wrestler as well. So I would never ever call an athlete, the F word,
Right.
as far as being fake is concerned. Granted, the outcome is predetermined, but at the end of the day, you still have to get to the outcome. It's kind of like, people were saying, I hate to say it like this, it's kind of like your destiny being predetermined.
Mm-hmm.
You still got to walk through the steps in order to get there. Ain't nobody just gonna hand it to you. So your destiny could be to become, the greatest gamer of all time, but at the end of the day, you still have to learn to play the game and learn how to get through the game. No pun intended. So you still have to, in order to get to the, you still got to get through the steps in order to get there. So for people who say that wrestling is, in fact, the F word, which, like I said, I don't want to offend anybody. I stay away from that word in wrestling. It's choreographed. You still have to get there in order to finish the match. Because as we saw in a lot of cases, we saw with Triple H, towards quadricep, not once, but twice. We saw with Randy Orton in the middle of a match. Not only Randy Orton, but Batista, in the same match getting hurt.
Let's
These,
not
what
forget
these
Steve.
men,
Let's not forget Steve Austin, SummerSlam '97,
yes,
the
what
botch pile
these
driver.
men and women do to their body and women do to their bodies is nothing short of amazing. And if you really think about it, man, I don't want to sell any other sport short, but wrestlers are the greatest athletes, some of the greatest athletes in the world. Because when you think about these men and women wrestle up into their 50s. In every other sport, you're done by your 40s. I mean, it just now got to the point where you're done in your 40s in football. But when you think about how long Ric Flair was wrestling, how long The Rock wrestled, how long a lot of guys, even past their peak prime, was wrestling. When you think about how long Hulk Hogan was wrestling, these are some of the greatest athletes in the world, and the way that they keep their bodies in shape after that pounding is nothing short of amazing. So you got to give credit where credit's due. Like I said, the ending may be predetermined, but you still have to get to the ending. Like I said, even with a lot of scripts, even in Hollywood, the script is laid before you, but you have to get to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So big ups to every wrestler, especially like I said, Louise. If you're watching, shout out to you. One of the great wrestlers that I know, and Hey, I would never call a wrestler the F word as far as being fake is concerned, because you're not a fake. You're a great athlete, and guess what, man? You still got to get to the end of the predetermination. So, I personally, as a former athlete myself, I would never call a wrestler a fake.
Yeah. I just think, as Jim Ross put it, he thought the Brawl for All was a cluster, and it was, because I mean, at the end of the day, people ended up getting hurt. I understand what Russo was trying to do, because he wanted to do everything he can to get ratings, and obviously he wanted to take on the Jerry Springer approach. But at the same time, when you're fighting for real, I mean, you got wrestlers fighting like two drunks at a bar. Like, like how does that work? You all right? You need water? You good? I mean, that's
Wait
what
a
Jim
minute.
Cornette said. That's how Jim Cornette said. I mean, you
I
got.
I'm
but
sorry. Go ahead.
but man, it was just the bottom line. It was just a horrible idea, because you're getting people to fight for something for real, but they've never done it or experienced it or trained it. Like, you're trying to treat it like it's an actual boxing fight. I don't know what Vince Russo was trying to accomplish, but either way, man, it just failed. And it's just become more and more obvious to why Jim Cornette and others have a strong level of feeling for him, because of how the way he treated wrestling at the time. I remember, Champ, we had a long discussion about Bash at the Beach in terms of how the way he was doing things in WCW. And I told him, the mistake that he made for WCW is when he tried to replicate those things he did in the WWE.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that would work. And it also, and yeah, I'm not trying to hurt or discredit Vince Russo and his contributions, but you did have great talent. And in that WCW, you try to implement those things, and it just didn't work out.
Just because you do it at one place doesn't mean it's going to work at the next place. I mean, and you can, and there's evidence of everywhere when it comes to there. When it comes to that, when you can go from one job being great as far as at one company to another and try to change the culture, I mean, it's not necessarily going to work. And you have to read the room. I don't think he did a great job at that. You have to read the room. And my thing is, it's okay to want to bring up young talent, because that's the lifeblood of the wrestling business, as well as any other sport. You're not going to be able to rely on the older guys forever. But at the same time, you can't kill the old while bringing in the new. And if you want great evidence of that, look at how Paul Heyman booked SmackDown from 2003 all the way up to, I think it was 2010. I mean, well, during the Ruthless Aggression era. Although he made great stars in Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Randy Orton, and guys like that, those other guys, with Hulk Hogan and Brock Lesnar and guys like that, their status was never jeopardized because of that.
Right.
If you really want evidence on how to book, Paul Heyman was one of the greatest at that. Not to mention, a wrestler who, like I said, we can't say his name out of respect. He got his big break on SmackDown. It wasn't Raw. It was SmackDown. He had some of his greatest matches with Kurt Angle at the Royal Rumble. He had some of his greatest matches with Brock Lesnar. And, you know, funny thing about him, if you go back and look at WCW, he had a great match with Sting on Monday Nitro that was booked by who? Vince Russo. That's a pay-per-view match. When you think about a wrestler of that caliber and his technical skills versus a Sting, and it's on Monday Nitro for the World Heavyweight title, and then not only that, I think he gets put over. So for him to go over on Monday night against an icon like Sting, that just goes to show you the problems on Nitro during the Vince Russo era. I wish it would have been a lot better because, hey, like I said, I'm from down south. I was a WCW guy through and through up until 1999. I
I
will
got to
say
give
that.
you credit for this, champ. The biggest mistake in WCW history, and you mentioned this, Bret Hart never having a match with Hulk Hogan.
Yep. Bret Hart never had a match with Hulk Hogan, and that was a problem. And I think that's the biggest mistake in wrestling history, not just in WCW, but WWE as well, because that would have been one heck of a passive passing of the torch moment. That would have been the true moment where you could say the golden age of wrestling has passed the torch to the new generation. And I think that would have gave Bret Hart the over. He was already over, as you know what, but I think that would have put him even over, especially if it's a clean finish, against the Golden Goose, back then. I think that would have put him over beyond imaginability. But I think, they didn't let Bret Hart fight Hogan. They put him in very, very lackluster matches with Sting and Halloween Havoc. Although it was a good match, Booker T, had a great match with Chris Benoit, but sorry, had a great match with
It's all good.
CB, but by then it was too little, too late. And yeah, that was a that was a tragedy within itself. My bad, PSP man.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Um, but yeah, man, the brawl for all, and I felt bad for Bart Gunn because when he won, and a lot of people didn't actually thought that he was going to win. He wasn't taken seriously. People didn't actually think he had no chance of beating Dr. Death Steve Williams or even beating Godfather. Because remember, Bart Gunn said that he was going to do something to Godfather in that match, and Godfather's like, yeah, whatever. But Godfather even admitted he took Bart Gunn for granted. And I just felt bad for Bart Gunn because after that match and winning the tournament, I think it was like, what, $75,000 for the thing?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have no future plans for him.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, man. And I mean, when you think about Bart Gunn, you think unfortunately two things that you think about when you think about Bart Gunn. When you think about him, you think about the brawl for all, and you think about the fact that Sonny turned on him and Billy Gunn when they lost the tag team titles. So those are two very unfortunate things that you think about, which takes away from how talented Bart Gunn was. Bart Gunn was real talented as a tag team, and he had some talent as a solo guy as well. But unfortunately, when you think about Bart Gunn, two things people are going to bring up. People are going to bring up the brawl for all, and people are going to bring up the angle in which Sonny turned on the Smoking Guns after they lost the tag titles. So those are
Yeah,
two unfortunate things that when you think about Bart, Mr. Gunn, that it pretty much takes away from his what little legacy that he already has.
right.
So, and those are two of the hugest black eyes on his career because it's like when you think about the casual fan, it's like, oh, Bart Gunn, oh, the Brawl for All guy, oh, the guy who Sonny turned on, and back then the tag titles, excuse me, back then the tag titles didn't hold the significance that it had today. So when you think about the Smoking Guns, you really can't say, oh, that was one of the greatest tag teams of all time. Back then, they was just putting tag teams together just for the sake of having tag team championships. So
Yeah,
really, during that time
very
in the
unfortunate.
WWE, oh my bad, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I agree with everything you said, Cheb. It's very unfortunate for him because unfortunately that's going to be his legacy.
Yeah. And if you really think about tag team wrestling back then, the greatest tag teams was in WCW during the time. When you think about the Road Warriors, when you think about the Steiner Brothers, when you think about Nash and Hall, not to mention the great
Harlem
Harlem
Heat.
Heat. Yeah. So, they, as far as tag team wrestling, they didn't have anything on WCW. So when you think about Bart Gunn, unfortunately, he's a punchline in wrestling history, man. So unfortunately for him, hey, brawl for all, and Sonny turning on you after you lost to go join the Godwins is something that you'll always be remembered for. And unfortunately, that takes away from the legacy. And you are essentially the Marty Jannetty of the Smoking Guns at this point in time.
Yeah, very unfortunate, man. But just really unfortunate moment in history. It's just sad because a lot of wrestlers were hurt, and unfortunately, it cost the career of Dr. Death Steve Williams. Because after that brawl for all, that was it for him in the World Wrestling Federation.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we lost the great Dr. Death Steve Williams. And like I said, man, much like, what's so unfortunate about him and no, what's so unfortunate about him, Bart Gunn, excuse me, Dr. Death Steve Williams, Bart Gunn, and Darren Draws, they didn't get a chance to redeem themselves.
Right.
They didn't get a redemption. When you think about John Bradshaw Layfield had a chance to go on and he became the longest reigning champion in SmackDown history up until a certain point until he had an opportunity to put over John Cena, became one of the greatest heels in modern day history. When you think about how snobbish, if I can say that word, can I say that word? Is that,
Yeah, you could say snobbish or condescending. He was
yeah,
condescending at
how
times.
snobbish that he was. You think about how snobbish that he was, and how I won't even say snob, how bougie that he was,
The
as
limos, the suits,
yes,
cowboy hats.
all these little insults. If you really want to think about it, he was someone before they became president. If you
Right.
really go back and look at his character, it's like go
Oh,
back and look at him.
no, no. I know. Do you remember when Kurt Angle presented some type of award and he
Yeah,
won it? And then there was a certain thing. I can't get into all the details, but remember that incident?
yes.
Yeah.
So he was essentially the president before the president was the president. If you get what I'm trying to say,
Right.
I'm not trying to offend anybody. So yeah, he was the president before the president was the president. So he was one of the greatest heels of all time. When you think about the Godfather, although he had his gimmick, we will say he became the Intercontinental Champion. He was a fan favorite. When he came out with the ladies, everybody cheered. When you think about, even Mark Merrow to a certain extent, although people would say it was lackluster, he did have a one with Sable and Jacqueline. When you think about, there was another guy in the Brawl for All as well.
Who?
I forget his name. But with the exception of a few guys, with the exception of those three, everybody who participated had a chance to redeem themselves. Unfortunately, Darren Draws, shortly after that, tragedy struck. Dr. Death, that was the end of him in the WWE, had to go to WCW. And, unfortunately for him, he's tied with not only with the Brawl for All, but with the character of him making fun of his longtime mentor in Jim Ross. Because remember, when he went to WCW, there was a character named Oklahoma who was making fun of Jim Ross, which Mr. Cornette, had a lot of words to say to Ed Ferrara about that as well when he went and joined WCW. So, and then, Darren Draws, the tragedy, Dr. Death, the tragedy, Bart Gunn, punchline of history. So when you think about the Brawl for All, it just none of those three guys got a chance to redeem themselves. When you look back at the other guys, they had a chance to redeem themselves. It's just unfortunate that, Draws, Mr. Draws, and a lot of those big three, did not have a chance to redeem themselves. And unfortunately, they were either gone. In Bart Gunn's case, he was gone from the wrestling business, and tragedy struck the other two. And God rest his soul, Dr. Death Steve Williams, one of the all-time greats, not only in the WWE as tag team, but as a territory guy, and as a wrestler at Oklahoma. I mean, he definitely
Physical
got a bad
specimen.
rap. Yeah, a
He
specimen. He was, look, Dr. Death. This is my favorite phrase was no joke. So yeah, so unfortunately those three who could have became big stars. I know Dr. Death had the potential to become a huge star, especially if he would have faced
Oh
your
yeah,
GOAT,
because
Stone
remember,
Cold.
yeah, that was the goal. They wanted him to face Stone Cold. They wanted to
So
see him get that type of run.
so and him going to WCW, that was unfortunately the beginning of the end. Especially when him and Ed Ferrara was making fun of Jim Ross. And, he became a punchline for Jim Ross. So yeah, I just hate that those three guys didn't have a chance to redeem themselves. Everybody else who was a part of Brawl for All, especially the big names, had a chance to redeem themselves. Unfortunately, those three did not.
Yeah. Very unfortunate, man. It's just really sad to see what those three had to deal with. But I just wish those three nothing but the best. That's all you can really say at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, folks, that concludes the rest of the Sports PSP podcast. Don't worry, folks. New episode will be out Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Check us out on YouTube. Like and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate my man, Undisputed World Champ, for hopping on to the pod. Any final words, champ, and let them know where to follow you.
Undisputed world champ on TikTok, world champ underscore 2.0. You can catch me at a lot of PSP's collaborations on Instagram. If you are not subscribed to PSP's Instagram, I suggest you go over and you subscribe immediately, because he drops a lot of, not only does he drops a lot of gym on his pages, but you see a lot of young talent. And I do use that term loosely because I'm not very young, but he does, give the opportunity for a lot of us who are upcoming in podcasts in order to showcase. So PSP, thank you for that. But go follow his Instagram page. And, I would be remiss if I didn't say, hell of a job. 7,000 subscribers. Congratulations to you. I salute you. So 7,000 subscribers, and go subscribe to his Instagram page. Hell of a job on not only showcasing yourself, but showcasing guys like myself, BRF, um, Harrison, just to name a few. So we thank you for all your contributions that you do. So and not only that, people, please, please, please don't go out here in this heat. Don't do that. Stay inside, drink your cold glass of water, drink water. Don't be drinking all them energy drinks and Coca-Colas. We all love a good taste of a Coca-Cola, but drink some water so you won't pass out. That's the best advice I could give to you at this point in time. But PSP, thank you, man. Congratulations on everything. Thank you for all the contributions that you do for the sports community. We appreciate you.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the love and support y'all give me. It's one of the reasons why I love doing what I do, which is podcasts. It's my number one passion. It's my number one love, and I will continue to do my absolute best to give you the best type of content as only I can give you. And also, it wouldn't be just Sports PSP. Shout outs to Champ. Please go follow Champ, BRF, Harrison, Broad, Casual, Maria, Brandon from the block, the whole nine. Everyone go check out and like and subscribe to their content and support content creators, man, because we put in a lot of time. I don't think people realize or understand how much hard work we as content creators do. Yes, it's a lot of fun, but it is a lot of work. So do your best to just support the content creators out there, whether young, whether old, man. And we're gonna continue doing nothing but great things. That I know for an absolute fact, and I know all of us are doing some great things as far as our work. But y'all know where to follow me yet? Sports PSP. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Already over 7,000 subscribers. Great job, and we're gonna continue to do more and more. IG Sports PSP as well as TikTok Sports PSP3. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all day. Y'all stay safe, and we is out. Peace.